Nathaniel Colley, when you hear that name, given where we are right now on this site, what goes through your mind?
The importance of the name Nathaniel Colley and the importance of this historical site is that it created pathways for every person of color, like me, in Sacramento, to live anywhere we want in Sacramento. It was the key to desegregating housing, as we know. We take it for granted today because we can move anywhere freely. But before those actions, we could not move anywhere. We could only move with places that didn't have racially restricted covenants. And this is what brings us to the story of the West End, downtown. It was one of those places that did not have race covenants, which means entire ethnic enclaves were locked into downtown. And as redevelopment comes and moves them out, they have to move to places without race covenants, which is why you see the enclaves now develop in Oak Park and in Del Paso Heights. And now you see this new formation in our city that comes like an X with prosperity going from west to east, and concentrations of poverty, race, going from North Highlands to Meadowview. And we're locked into this geography for the rest of time here.
So how important, Nathaniel Colley is not maybe as well known as many of the famous figures during the civil rights movement because he wasn't a politician or a prophet or a preacher necessarily. He was an attorney who did his advocating in a courtroom. So how important is it for people to know about him and what he did, especially younger folk?
Well, first of all, putting him in a courtroom was probably one of the best things that could ever happen to us as people of color in the city. Because one, the law wasn't accessible to us back then, and for the most part still isn't today. So having somebody to go in there and actually use the law as a device to help people was really a resource that communities of color needed in Sacramento. Otherwise, they would not be where they are today. And having this historical event memorialized in a historical district is of the utmost importance, because first, we can show that civil rights is not something, it's not an optional designation you can take away anytime you want to bring in market rate housing. It is a lifetime designation that reminds us of the efforts that people took to make sure that we can be free anywhere we want in the city, that we can move into any neighborhood we want. This is of the utmost importance today.
So having a civil rights center named after Nathaniel Colley on the site where he first desegregated housing in Sacramento, this is a significant place to have a remembrance, if you will.
This is the most appropriate place to have a center that can actually partake in the study of civil rights and race relations in Sacramento. Sacramento may be seen as this diverse place of different peoples and incomes and all of this sort, mingling as one happy family, but that is very far from the truth. We see patterns of segregation still exist, we see patterns of poverty still exist, and when we see these patterns of poverty, we think that the value of these properties are diminished, and they become prime targets for things like redevelopment. We see it in Oak Park, we see it here, and this basically continues that intergenerational segregation of people and displacement of people as we can move them at our will, depending on our need for speculative development.